Hi, my name is Rachel Paxton, and today I'm going to show you how to can green beans. What will you get out of this class? You will learn how to can green beans, and I will lead you through the process step by step. I'll give you the recipe and canning supply list and an altitude reference chart that you can download and print out for future reference. You will find these in your course materials. You will also gain the confidence you need to try out more pressure canning recipes on your own. My name is Rachel Paxton, and I'm a freelance writer and mom of 5 children, ages 28 to 6. This is me and my husband Dave. We've been married for 20 years, and this is 3 of my children. Zachary and Christian are twins. They're almost 11, and Trenton is 6. We also have a 28 and a 26-year-old daughter. I have been canning for more than 20 years, and I'm also the owner of the website creativehomemaking.com. For this recipe, you will just need green beans and salt. I didn't list any amounts of ingredients because it doesn't really matter how many you have. I will tell you how many will fit in a jar, so however many green beans you have will be fine. You also need a pressure canner. You can't use a boiling water canner to can green beans. You need a pressure canner. You also need a jar lifter and pint or quart-sized canning jars. This is what a pressure canner looks like. It costs about $60 to buy a pressure canner. You can get them at Amazon. I have included a link to the one that I use in the supply list that's included with your course materials, and it includes a link to Amazon if you need to purchase one of those. This is a dial gauge canner. There's 2 kinds of pressure canners, a weighted pressure canner and a dial gauge. I use the dial gauge. I think that is the most commonly used kind. So that's the kind I'm going to show you how to use today. You also need a jar lifter. Okay, the first thing you need to do is sterilize your rings and lids in the dishwasher. 2 pounds of green beans will fill approximately 1 quart size. 2 pounds of green beans will fill 1 quart sized jar, or 2 pints, and my 2 pounds filled 3 pints, so that'd be like 1.5 quarts. So if you're using pint sized jars, 2 pounds will do about 3 pints. So that's what I did for this recipe. And you can sterilize your jars in the dishwasher or in boiling water on the stove. I like to use the dishwasher because it's really easy just to throw everything in there and then it's ready when you need it. You can reuse jars and rings if you have jars already. You just can't reuse the lids, so you need to purchase lids every time that you're going to can. The first thing you want to do is fill your canner with about 3 inches of water and heat it until it's boiling. And then you want to rinse and sort your green beans. Throw away any bad ones. Next, you want to cut off the ends of the green beans and then cut the long ones in either halves or thirds. If you don't have to use a knife to do this. Sometimes I just use my fingers to snap them off. So you can use a knife or use your fingers, either one. Next, you want to place a teaspoon of salt into each sterilized jar. The salt is optional. You don't need to use salt, but I like to use salt with mine because it cooks into the green beans while they're cooking, but it's not necessary to preserve them. Next, fill the jars with the green beans that you cut. You don't want to fill it all the way to the top, but approximately to the bottom line that's going around the top of the jar. Next, you want to fill the rest of the way up with boiling water, leaving 1-inch headspace. The headspace is the amount of space between the top of the green beans and water to the top of the jar. It's important to have the right amount of headspace because your green beans will expand while they're cooking in the pressure canner, and if there's not enough space inside the jar, your jar can explode. So it's important to have enough headspace. So whatever your recipe says for headspace, just follow that guidance. So for this recipe, it's 1 inch. Next, you want to wipe the rims of the jar with a damp paper towel or kitchen towel just to make sure you don't have any water or anything else on the top of the jar that will keep it from sealing. Next, put your jars and your rings and lids on the jars. You just want them finger tight. They don't have to be super tight. And put your jars into the pressure canner. You're going to process them at 10 pounds of pressure for 20 minutes for pints or 25 minutes for quarts. And that is for 1,000 feet in elevation or below. If you live above 1,000 feet in elevation, you will need to process your beans for a longer amount of time because it takes longer to get the temperature up to the right temperature when you live higher in elevation. So if that's the case, there is an altitude adjustment chart included with your course materials, so you want to reference that if that applies to you. So if you're 1,000 feet or below in elevation, this is the correct processing time. And just to give you a little overview on using a pressure canner, if you've never used one before, this is what it looks like. After you get the jars in the canner, you want to put the lid on top. You may have noticed that there's not as much water in the canner as when you have a boiling water canner. When you're boiling water canning things, you want to have the water above your jars, but when you're pressure canning, that's not necessary. The main thing is to make sure that the water doesn't boil out of the pan while it's canning. However, the water does not have to cover the jars completely. So 3 to 4 inches is usually sufficient, and if it's not covering the jars, that's okay. So after you put the lid on, the first thing you're going to do is get the water boiling, and you'll see on the pressure canner that there's a pressure regulator and a vent pipe. You need to pay attention to those when you get started. You want to take the pressure regulator off of the vent pipe and just let the water boil until steam starts coming out of the vent pipe. You'll see the steam coming out of the vent pipe, and you want that to happen for about 10 minutes before you start building up the pressure in your canner. So after about 10 minutes of seeing steam coming out of the vent pipe, you want to put the pressure regulator on the vent pipe, and that's when the canner will start building up pressure. So as soon as that happens, you'll see the lid lock, which is flush with the top of the lid right now. As soon as there's pressure in the pot, the lid lock will pop up. So you'll see it pop up, and then you will know that there's pressure in there, and you don't want to open it. And you want to start watching the dial gauge. And the dial gauge will start moving up quickly as it gets hot. And for this recipe, you want 10 pounds of pressure. As soon as you see the gauge getting close to 10 pounds, you want to start turning the temperature on your stove down. You'll want to have it on high temperature to get it boiling and while it's building up pressure, but when it gets past 10 pounds in pressure, you need to turn it down between low and medium low in order to keep a constant temperature. If you leave it on high, the pressure will keep building and it will be too much pressure in your pan and it won't stay the right pressure. It needs to be 10 pounds of pressure, not higher than that. So lower your temperature until it stays constantly at 10 pounds of pressure. If your pressure were to fall below 10 pounds during the amount of time that you're timing, you need to start timing over again. It needs to be 10 pounds or a little bit higher for the entire time that you're timing it. So if it does drop below 10, you want to turn your temperature up a little bit and start your time over again. And just another note about stoves, if you have a ceramic stove, you may not want to do pressure canning on your ceramic stove. I have tried it on ceramic stoves before, and ceramic stoves, the temperature fluctuates in order to keep a constant temperature on the stove. And when you're pressure canning, you don't want your temperature fluctuating because it will make the pressure go up and down. And it's possible to do it if you stand and watch it the whole time, but you will have to manually change the temperature in order to keep it a constant temperature, and that doesn't work very well. And some manufacturers don't recommend you do it on ceramic stoves because it can also crack your stove if it gets too hot. So read the instructions that came with your stove, and you can try to do it on your ceramic stove, but I don't recommend it. It's a lot easier on just regular stoves, and I much prefer to do it that way. And you can also scratch your ceramic stove. I did that one time too, pulling a pan across the top of it, and it scratched it. So after you're done processing your beans, you want to turn the temperature on the stove off, and as soon as you turn it off, just don't move the pan, just leave it there, and the pressure will slowly drop in your pan. You don't want to open it until the lid lock goes back down. It will go back down and be flush with the pan again, and about 15 minutes later or so, it's safe to open the pan. So don't open it until the lid lock goes down, and then you'll know for sure that the pressure is out of the pan. So after you take the lid off, just take the jars with your jar lifter, take them out and put them on the kitchen counter on a kitchen towel, let them cool. The jars will usually seal in the pressure canner, but it could take 15 or 20 minutes for them to finish sealing when they come out. To tell if it's sealed or not, you want to push your finger down in the middle of the lid, and if it goes down and up again, then it is not sealed, but it should be flat. It shouldn't give when you push down on it. You'll probably hear a pinging noise when the jars are sealed. If you have a jar that didn't seal, you can still eat it, but you need to put it in the refrigerator and eat it within a week or two. And jars that did seal, you can store in a dark, cool place for 1 to 2 years. Canning green beans is really easy once you get the hang of using your pressure canner. I canned about 50 pint jars of green beans this past summer when my green beans are going crazy in my garden, and it's really nice to be able to have them all winter when we want them, and I had more than enough to last us all winter, so that's really nice. And it was very, very inexpensive. Green beans are very inexpensive to grow, so hope you enjoy this recipe, and I hope to see you again soon.